Madison smirked, tapping away at her work computer. The office was quiet, the gentle hum of fluorescent lights overhead blending with the rhythmic clicks of her keyboard. Her reflection flickered on the darkened monitor beside her, perfectly composed, confident. It was the look of a woman who knew she had the upper hand. "Can't wait to see you tonight," she typed, her fingers moving effortlessly over the keys. She attached a picture, one she definitely shouldn't be sending during office hours, a teasing glimpse, just enough to keep his attention hooked. Her lips curled as she leaned back, stretching languidly in her chair. Madison had perfected the art of duplicity. By day she was the diligent, ambitious professional, an asset to the company, someone her boss trusted. By night, she was something else entirely, and she was certain she was untouchable. What she didn't realize? She was being watched. Across the office, Liam Carter sat at his desk, a calm expression masking the storm beneath. He had known for weeks, maybe longer. He'd seen the late-night messages, the hidden smiles, the way she guarded her phone like a precious secret, but he hadn't confronted her, not yet, because Liam didn't believe in loud, messy scenes. He believed in precision. Instead of accusations, he gathered proof, screenshots, email logs, timestamps, everything catalogued and stored with meticulous care. And now, he had what he needed. With deliberate movements, he clicked print. A faint whir filled the air as the printer in the corner came to life, spitting out page after page of undeniable truth. Madison's flirtations, her suggestive pictures, the explicit conversations, all conducted through company devices in clear violation of corporate policy. Liam rose from his chair, rolling his shoulders as he retrieved the crisp stack of papers. No emotion flickered across his face as he slid them into a plain manila envelope. No return address, no identifying marks, just cold, hard evidence. He walked down the empty hallway, passing rows of cubicles bathed in the glow of computer screens left in standby mode. When he reached the executive suite, he paused. Richard Holloway's office? The boss was meticulous, ruthless when it came to professional misconduct. His rules were ironclad, his expectations clear. No misuse of company property, no inappropriate behavior, and above all, no scandal that could reflect poorly on his firm. Liam placed the envelope dead center on the pristine mahogany desk. It would be the first thing Richard saw in the morning. With a final glance around, Liam turned and walked away. No hesitation, no second thoughts. By this time tomorrow, Madison Hayes wouldn't just be out of a relationship, she'd be out of a job. And the best part? She would have no one to blame but herself. Monday morning arrived with the quiet hum of ambition that always filled the office at the start of the week. Employees streamed in, clutching their coffee cups like lifelines, their footsteps a rhythmic chorus against the polished tile floor. Madison walked in as she always did, head high, designer handbag swinging at her side, radiating confidence. Liam watched from his desk, a silent observer as she greeted her co-workers with that effortless charm, the kind that made her seem untouchable. She had no idea, no clue that before the morning was over, the foundation she had so carefully built would crumble beneath her feet. Richard Holloway arrived at precisely 7:50 a.m. just as he did every day. He never walked in early, never late. His suit, always perfectly tailored, was a reflection of his unwavering discipline. He strode past his assistant, barely nodding as she rattled off his schedule. His mind was already on the day ahead. But the envelope on his desk changed everything. He spotted it immediately, its placement too precise to be an afterthought. His brow furrowed as he picked it up, flipping it over to check for a sender. There was none. Just a heavy weight inside, pages thick with revelation. With a quick flick of his letter opener, the contents spilled onto his desk, a cascade of damning evidence. The first email was mild, flirty, playful, something that could have been brushed off. But as he flipped through, the messages grew bolder, the attachments more incriminating. Richard's jaw tightened, his grip on the papers firm as he scanned each detail. The timestamps, the company email domain, the blatant disregard for policy. The corporate world thrived on control, on the delicate balance between personal lives and professional expectations. Madison had shattered that balance with reckless arrogance. Richard leaned back, exhaling slowly. He wasn't a man prone to emotional reactions, but what he hated more than incompetence was stupidity. And this? This was stupidity in its purest form. She had risked everything, not just her job but the company's reputation. Over what? Some cheap thrill? By 9:15 a.m. the decision was made. At exactly 9:30 a.m., Madison's name lit up on the office-wide intercom. "Madison Hayes, please report to Human Resources immediately." The words echoed through the workspace, causing heads to lift, eyes to dart toward her. Liam kept his expression neutral as he watched her blink in confusion. The shift was subtle, but he saw it. The flicker of unease that passed over her face. Still, she composed herself quickly. HR calls weren't uncommon. Maybe it was just a minor issue. A payroll mistake, a meeting about a new policy. She straightened her blouse, smoothing her hair as she stood, flashing a quick smile to a nearby colleague as if to assure herself, and everyone else, that she was fine. But Liam knew. The walk to HR was a long one, the weight of every step pressing heavier on her shoulders. She barely noticed the whispered exchanges between co-workers as she passed, the curious glances, the way the office seemed just a little quieter than usual. By the time she stepped into the HR office, Richard Holloway was already there, seated across from the department head. "Have a seat," he said, his tone measured, giving nothing away. Madison obeyed, forcing a smile as she folded her hands in her lap. "What's this about?" she asked, keeping her voice light. Richard slid the stack of emails across the desk. Madison's stomach dropped. The first page alone was enough to make her blood run cold. The subject lines, the timestamps, the pictures she thought had been deleted. She flipped through the pages, her mind racing. This couldn't be real. How? She swallowed hard, her breath coming in shallow, uneven pulls. I don't understand," she said, her voice just barely steady. This is private." Richard's gaze didn't waver. "It's company property." That was it, that was the end. Madison opened her mouth, searching for words, but for the first time in her life, she had nothing to say. She had always believed she could talk her way out of anything. But this wasn't something she could charm her way past. She had played the game recklessly, and now she was about to learn what it meant to lose. Madison felt her pulse quicken as she sat in the HR office, her fingers gripping the armrests of the chair like they were the only thing keeping her grounded. The silence in the room stretched, thick with unspoken judgment. Across from her, Richard Holloway watched her carefully, his expression unreadable. He wasn't a man known for patience, and today was no exception. "Tell me, Madison," he said, his voice even, almost casual, "at what point did you think this was a good idea?" Her throat was dry, her mind scrambling for an explanation, an excuse, anything. "I didn't think it much is clear," he cut her off, tapping a finger against the thick stack of printed messages. "You used company devices to conduct personal business. Do you even know how reckless that is?" Madison opened her mouth, but no words came out. What could she possibly say? That she didn't think she would get caught? That she believed she was too valuable to face consequences? Richard leaned forward, his sharp eyes locking onto hers. "You've put this company in an extremely difficult position. This is beyond misconduct. Do you have any idea what could happen if this got out?" She swallowed hard. The words felt like a noose tightening around her throat. I never meant to." "Oh, I don't care what you meant," Richard said coldly. "What matters is what you did, and I can't ignore this." The HR director, a woman in her late 50s with short iron-gray hair, spoke up for the first time. Her voice was calm, but there was no warmth in it. "Madison, we have a strict policy regarding the use of company property. These emails, these messages, they are a clear violation of our code of conduct, and quite frankly, they show an appalling lack of judgment." Madison felt the walls closing in. This couldn't be happening, not to her. This is ridiculous," she said, her voice rising in desperation. "I've given years to this company. I've landed clients worth millions. You can't just—" Richard's brow arched. "Can't just what? Hold you accountable?" He let the words settle before he shook his head. "You're right about one thing, Madison. You were valuable to this company. But now?" He exhaled slowly and leaned back. "You're a liability." The HR director reached for a folder and slid it across the table. Madison hesitated before picking it up, her hands trembling slightly as she flipped it open. It was all there, her termination papers, the severance package, the bare minimum required by contract. No negotiation, no second chances. Her entire career erased in a single morning. She could feel her breath coming short and fast, but she forced herself to stay composed. She wouldn't break in front of them. She wouldn't give them the satisfaction. Her voice was tight when she finally spoke. "You're making a mistake." Richard's gaze didn't waver. "No, Madison. You did." The meeting was over. Madison stood, gripping the folder as if it were her last lifeline. As she walked toward the door, her world unraveling around her, she finally began to understand. She hadn't just lost her job, she had lost everything. Madison stepped out of the HR office, the weight of the termination papers heavy in her hands. Her legs felt unsteady, her vision slightly blurred as she walked back through the office she had once ruled with effortless confidence. Now, the energy in the room felt different. It wasn't just her imagination. People were watching. Some whispered, some barely concealed their smirks, and others quickly looked away, pretending to be absorbed in their screens. It was humiliating. Just an hour ago, she had been Madison Hayes, the woman who could talk her way out of anything. Now she was walking a path she never imagined she'd take, one leading straight out of the building, jobless, powerless, and utterly exposed. Liam watched from his desk, keeping his expression neutral as she passed by. Inside, he felt a quiet satisfaction. He had imagined this moment many times, how she would react, how it would feel to see her stripped of the arrogance she had always carried. And yet, now that it was happening, he didn't feel the rush of victory he expected. Just a deep, steady sense of closure. Madison made it to her desk and grabbed her things with shaking hands. It wasn't much, just a few personal items, a framed picture she barely glanced at, and a designer notebook filled with plans for a future that no longer existed. A voice broke the silence. "Tough morning." She turned sharply, finding Emily, one of the junior associates, standing nearby with an expression that was almost pitying. Almost. Madison's jaw tightened. "Mind your business." Emily just shrugged. "It is my business when someone who thought she was untouchable gets kicked out for breaking the rules." Heat flared in Madison's chest. She wanted to lash out, to put Emily in her place, but what could she say? The power dynamics had shifted. She was no longer in control. She turned away, her heart pounding as she made her way to the elevator. The ride down felt endless, the mirrored walls reflecting a woman she barely recognized. One whose perfectly controlled world had shattered in a matter of minutes. Stepping into the lobby, she forced herself to keep her head high. She wouldn't let them see her fall apart. But the moment she pushed through the revolving doors and stepped onto the sidewalk, the reality of her situation hit her like a freight train. She had no job, no reputation to lean on, no backup plan. And worst of all, she had no idea who had done this to her. Her mind raced as she pulled out her phone, her fingers tightening around it like a lifeline. She needed to call someone, anyone, who could help her. And then she saw it. Her company email had been deactivated. Her office access revoked. Messages from former colleagues already vanishing. It was like she had never existed. And Liam? Liam had blocked her number. The final, undeniable proof that she had lost more than just her job. She had lost everything. Madison sat in her car, gripping the steering wheel so tightly that her knuckles turned white. The reality of what had just happened settled in like a slow-moving poison. She had always been in control, always the one calling the shots. But now? Now she was nothing. Her phone sat in the cup holder, useless. Every attempt to log into her company email had been met with the same cold message: access denied. Calls to Richard Holloway had gone straight to voicemail. And Liam? He hadn't just ignored her. He had blocked her. The realization stung worse than anything. Liam had done this. It had to be him. But how? She had been so careful, so discreet. There was no way he could have known, no way he could have collected enough proof to destroy her like this. Yet, here she was, jobless, humiliated, and spiraling. Her fingers hovered over her phone, debating whether to call him from a different number. But what would she even say? "Please explain how you just ruined my life?" As if he owed her anything. No, she needed to regroup. She needed a plan. With a deep breath, she pulled out of the parking lot and drove aimlessly through the city. It was strange, the way the streets looked the same when everything in her life had just collapsed. She had spent years carefully crafting her career, balancing her professional image with her secret indulgences, and yet, in a single morning, it had all been undone. Her mind raced with possibilities. Maybe she could spin this. Maybe she could claim wrongful termination, threaten legal action. If she could just get a meeting with Richard, she could talk her way out of this. But then her phone dinged with a notification. A simple, impersonal email from HR. HR, your termination has been finalized. All company assets and information have been secured. Attempts to dispute this decision will not be entertained. Madison nearly threw her phone across the car. They had shut every door before she even had the chance to knock. Her hands trembled as she thought of what came next. Her career in this industry was over. No respectable company would hire someone terminated for misconduct. And worse, this wasn't just about losing a paycheck. This was about losing her status. She had been somebody. Now she was just another cautionary tale. Her stomach twisted as another thought struck her. What would people say? Her colleagues, her rivals, even her so-called friends? Word would spread fast. She would become the topic of whispered conversations, the example of what not to do. And Liam? She could see it now, him moving on, unbothered, untouched by the wreckage he had left behind. He hadn't yelled, hadn't confronted her, hadn't given her the satisfaction of knowing when or how he had struck. He had simply ended her, and there was nothing she could do about it. Madison Hayes had played her game well, but in the end Liam had played it better.